This is an example of play video for D-Day Dice. This is Exercise Tiger, which you can see at the top of this board here. This is the board used for the 3 training scenarios that come with the game. The first scenario is just going to teach you some of the basics in terms of the turn sequence, rolling the dice, pairing things up, and moving. The goal of D-Day Dice is to get your playing piece, which of course is a die, into the bunker at the top of the board and survive the turn. In this particular scenario, there are no specialist cards, item cards, vehicle cards, or anything else. We're only concentrating on 2 things in this scenario. That is increasing our soldier count and increasing our courage, which is the medal. You can see for the start of the scenario we have 4 soldiers and everything else is at 0. The stars, which are used to recruit specialists, and the wrench, which is used to buy items, will not be used during this example. When you start a game of D-Day Dice, the board's going to dictate what cards are out. You'll have to look in the rule book, and it's going to dictate any special rules. Okay, we're not paying attention to anything on this board besides these medals up here. In this case, it's a 1. These numbers in the shields. In this particular start area, you can see I have 4 troops. That tells me I start with 4 troops. Now, the back of this map is the Omaha board, which is a much tougher scenario, and they've kind of increased from there. So I take my playing piece with 1 chevron and I go ahead and I place it there. Sorry about that, and I place it there. Now, D-Day Dice is broken into a turn sequence of 5 phases. As you saw in the components video, each player has 6 dice, 2 white, 2 red, and 2 blue. There's also a handy reference card which covers some of the symbols on the board, what the die results mean, the breakdown for item points, the turn sequence, and more importantly, the red, white, and blue, or the RWB bonuses. The red, white, and blue bonuses are the key part to this game. So phase 1 is simply rolling the dice. You take these 6 dice. I'll roll them out here so you can see them. And I roll. In this particular scenario, like I said, we're concentrating on soldiers, which on the die come in 2 forms. 1 soldier and 2 soldiers. And medals, which represent courage. Everything else we don't have to worry about for this scenario, with the exception of skulls. So on your first roll in phase 1 of the turn sequence, which is rolling the dice, you have to set aside 2 dice unless the rules tell you differently. In this particular case, I'm going to set aside or lock the double soldiers in red and white, and then I'm going to pick up everything else and re-roll. Now these 2 dice are locked in for the turn. I take my second roll and I can then put aside any dice I want and roll again. In this case, I'm going to keep the blue double soldier because it gives me a bonus, which I'll get to in a minute. And I'm going to re-roll everything else. So this is a very good roll. I've got more soldiers and a medal. Just for sake of example, if I roll a skull cancels out another die of my choice. So if I rolled the skull, I could take and cancel out the medal there, but I didn't roll the skull. I rolled this. So the first thing we do in phase 2, which is upkeep, is we adjust our unit marker. Our unit marker flips to a second chevron, and then later it may flip to a third. Finally, it might flip to this red arrow, which means you have to move during phase 4 of this turn. You can only stay in an area for 3 turns before you're forced to move. There are other spots on the board, like this black spot, where you would flip during this turn to the black shield. Those mean you have to move. You can't stay there another turn. And then there's the double green arrow, which is on this, which is a red, white, and blue bonus to advance without paying any of the costs, which I'm not going to get into here. So the first step during phase 2 is I flip this to the double chevron, and then I do my upkeep. So I'm going to add my regular upkeep. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 soldiers. So 9 on top of 4 would give me 13. And then I've collected 1 medal. In addition to this, I've also scored a red, white, and blue bonus of the double soldiers. On my card, it tells me that double soldiers are going to give me 6 more soldiers. So this goes, and it moves this from 13 to 19. So after the upkeep phase, my chevron's on 2. I've tallied all my resources and updated them on my wheel. Then I can kind of go ahead and clear off the dice. The next phase, phase 3, is to recruit specialists, buy items, fades, and trade resources. In this particular scenario, we're not doing any of that. Just know that, as I said in the beginning, stars are used to recruit specialists, and wrenches are used to give you item points to buy things. The cards themselves, for example, here's one right here, paratroop card. This can be recruited for 2 stars. It can be sacrificed to prevent the loss of up to 6 soldiers. Okay, so there's various cards. These happen to be the regular specialist cards that everybody has and can recruit from. And then there's unique specialists, which do other things, typically more powerful. When you recruit a card, it simply goes into the play area in front of you. Some of them, when you use, they get exhausted, like the paratroop card there, and others stay out permanently. So anyway, that's phase 3, which we are not doing in this turn. Phase 4 is the movement phase. Like I said, if I were here 3 turns, I would be forced to move during this phase, but I'm not. I can stay here 2 more turns if I want to. Right now I have 19 troops, 1 courage, and like I said, that's all we're paying attention to. You can see on the board here, and I'll zoom in for just a minute so you can get a look, that there's 1 medal there. So that means to move from this zone, which is a starting beach, to either this zone or this zone, is going to cost me 1 courage. I cannot stress how important it is to make sure that you remove the courage when you move up to a new zone. It's a common mistake I've seen made in many games that have been played so far, and it can really unbalance things. It doesn't break the game, but it kind of makes the game feel cheap when you're 6 or 7 turns in and you realize you haven't updated your courage. So anyway, I could move on this turn if I wanted to, and for sake of keeping this example brief, we will. So I move up to this phase, I flip myself back to the first chevron, I subtract, as I just said, my 1 courage to knock me down to 0, and that is the movement phase. Finally, the last phase is the combat phase. You'll see that in each sector there's a shield along with other information. The shield is how much damage I'm going to take if I'm in that sector during the turn. In this particular case, I'm going to lose 4 troops. You can see above it I would lose 6. And you can see in the center sector I would lose 3 plus that little red mark. That little red mark is a machine gun die roll, which means I typically roll there's a machine gun die, it's a 6-sided, and I roll and I add that to whatever that number is. So in this case, 3 plus 2, I would lose 5 troops. There are some boards where you're going to be rolling multiple machine gun dice. Like I said, this is a basic training scenario board. And in this scenario, we don't have to worry about that. So during the combat phase, I'm up here. I would go ahead and I would lose 4 troops, which would knock me down to 15. And then the turn would be over. So if I proceeded through to the next turn, there's my initial roll. I'm going to go ahead and set aside. Now I only have to lock in 2, but I can lock in more. I'm going to lock in the red, white, and blue metal because that's good for me. And if I wanted to, I could chance locking in the skulls, because 3 skulls actually is a bonus for the red, white, and blue. It's 20 item points, but since we're not using item points here, it doesn't matter. Take my second roll, 2 stars and a courage. I don't really need any more courage at this point, so I'm going to try and get some soldiers. Didn't work out. So I didn't get any soldiers this turn, and I got 4 courage. So again, during the upkeep phase, I will raise this to 4. My soldiers are still at 15, and I would flip this chevron, whoops, to the 2 spot. Clear my dice. We're skipping phase 3 for this scenario. Phase 4 is the move phase. So to move to the next sector, which could be here or here from this side, would cost me 2 courage. Oh, I forgot to mention that the 3 courage medals gets me a bonus of either 3 soldiers, or if I move this turn, I can ignore the requirements of the sector. So in other words, I could flip this to that green arrow I was showing you to where to go to represent the battle cry. And that means I could move to this sector or this sector without having to spend the courage. My current courage is a 4. I'm going to go ahead and use the battle cry for this example, and I'm going to move to this middle sector. Now you notice there's all sorts of other things on the board here. For example, when you're in this sector, you get +1 courage, +1 star over here. Here you need to sacrifice that particular unit to move in there. These dice are specific rules on the bottom of the board. There's all sorts of things, and it's usually explained in the rule book if they're not self-explanatory. So in this particular case, I've moved into this sector, and now I'm on the combat phase. And during the combat phase, I would roll a 6-sided die, and I rolled a bloody 6 plus the 3. I would lose 9 troops. That's not very good. That would knock me down, if my math is correct, to 6 troops, and I'm in trouble. You'll notice that you can move laterally on the board. In this particular case, for this scenario, we're not really concerned about minefields, but moving across minefields causes you to sacrifice guys. So if I wanted to move from here to here, not only would I have to pay the 2 courage, which is in the corner up here, I would also have to lose some guys from the mines. But I could move laterally. It doesn't cost any courage, but in this case, I'm in a black 6 sector. I'm going to lose 6 guys. So in this particular case, with 6 troops left, I need to roll some troops on this next turn. As I said, the goal here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, is to eventually make it to the bunker here, which in this case costs 4 courage to move into, and then I have to survive the combat phase when I'm in the bunker. So I'd have to move in with 4 and then survive a 12 plus a 6-sided roll. So as long as I have more than 19 troops when I go in here, there's really no way for me to fail. In a multiplayer game, everybody has to make it into the bunker. If somebody dies by losing their troops, or if they're forced to move and they can't pay the courage cost, they basically lost, and everybody has lost the game. So this is how you play, for the most part, D-Day Dice. I hope it was helpful.